Kicking things off in game number 1, we've got Zemi and Cooper who land at Dirty Docks. Now, what's really interesting about Dirty Docks is this is one of the POIs that was contested the most. Zemi and Cooper to the north, Reason and Faxi to the east, and then Hero and Gone to the southwest. Interestingly, all 3 of these teams were in the top 10, so obviously Dirty Docks in this was a very strong POI. In terms of looting path, they pretty much got access to the 2 main buildings to the north, and then all of the containers to the east of that as well, without being contested at all by any of the other teams, meaning this drop spot was extremely splittable. Another interesting thing they're doing is playing Storm a considerable amount. The first 5 zones, aka pretty much the first 10 minutes, are all 1 tick, so they only deal 1 damage per second, so they can stay in Storm for a long time. Now, in normal tournament games, they'd have to worry about Storm Surge, but that wasn't an issue at all in this tournament as it didn't pop once. So by staying in Storm, they can ensure they can reharvest a bunch of materials, which is really difficult to do later on. They can also then reuse a lot of these slurp trucks that are around, or the slurp barrels that are around, so they don't even have to carry that many medkits generally. Another important thing is the loadout choice. Notice how Cooper has 2 different types of mobility. He both has the grapple and the shockwaves, and then has 2 slurp juices on top of this, whereas Zemi is carrying a single grappler, 3 bigs, and then more heals in a chug jug. Basically, this means that if Zemi dies earlier, Cooper has more mobility to solo clutch, but they both have the same grapple that they can rotate together if they're both still alive. Of course, Cooper can also use the shockwaves to rotate them both together, which I'm sure we'll see later. Another thing that they do is pay attention to these supply drops a lot. Notice how they're making a really nice rotate along the north of the map here, inside of the water. And then in around 15 seconds, you're going to see that the supply drops spawn. Now, in reload, the supply drops actually show you where the next zone is going to be. And in this instance, it goes to the west, which is a max distance zone for them. So they rotate themselves relatively deep into this 3rd zone, knowing that 4th zone is going to be max distance. And then when it pops, you can see that they're almost inside of it already. Not quite. They didn't quite make sure they got all the way in, but they were close enough. Now, Cooper here makes a really great play to notice that there's a hill to the south of them, and hills in this are incredibly important because it's reload, meaning players are going to spawn out of the sky. So as soon as the next set of supply drops pop here, you can say they shockwave themselves to get up onto this hill early. This means that they're the first players that are going to be in that next zone because the zone is going to pull here, but also if players spawn above them, they're going to have great visibility to spray them out of the sky. So they decide to put Zemi up on top. Given his incredible aim, this is a great idea as he'll be able to spray players out of the sky, but at the same time, Cooper's just down below reharvesting any of the materials that they might have already used earlier on. You can see now that the next zone is popped that they knew was going to be there because of the forecast that they have from the supply drops. They're in pretty much the best position you could ask for. The highest hill, and then they have access to any other rotates. And now again, supply drops have pulled to the northwest, which shows that the zone's going to pull that direction. Another thing I'd like to mention is that Cooper still has his 2 slurp juices, and Zemi still has his 3 bigs and his max chug jug, which means that they haven't been tagged by a single player this entire game. But it's also just because they used their grapplers earlier on to get early into this good position. Then, like most teams, they use their shockwaves and their mobility again in these partials. When you have shockwaves, you have a bunch of grapplers. A lot of teams that I saw ended up just using them at this zone to get into the 5th, 6th, and 7th, as these rotates just drain far too many materials. And again, not a single lick of damage taken. Another important thing to note is because of this strategy, they have the 3rd highest amount of total materials going into endgame here. So there's only 2 teams who actually have more builds than them throughout this entire game. Alright, I want to watch the entire endgame from these guys because they ended up coming 2nd and they were so consistent. There wasn't a single game where they went down before the actual endgame itself. I want to see how they end up playing this out. They start things off, shockwave to the front side, which will get you naturally a little bit more split. And ooh, Zemi ends up whiffing the edit a little bit here and almost dies off the rip, which is the difficulty when you're going to use shockwaves that early on. But I really like the fact that he ended up creating a bunch more space, gave himself time to heal, pops the chug jug, can't speak, the chug jug there as well, gets them back into it. Now, of course, you're still really early into the moving zones, and if you don't know anything about competitive reload, the moving zones are incredibly brutal. They are so long, but it looks like Cooper's going straight for pre-edit play because he hears the team below them looking for a well that are already fighting and gets mats out of that. So Cooper has 131 builds now still. Zemi has 39. So at this point, they're still really well set up, but there's still 19 teams alive. So only 1 team has died, and if you don't know, top 10 is placement. So it's really brutal getting placement. So the fact that they ended up being so consistent was good. Nice little storm tank there by Cooper, who goes up, now creates a bunch of space as well. And their strategy seems to be continually using the grapplers to kind of get up a good layer, tarp a lot up front, spend a bunch of time staggering, healing, looking for a bunch of other elims. Nice little drop down here from Zemi, seeing that there was a free layer front side. And again, huge tarp now, which gives him a bunch of space to go back and try and look for some elims onto a lot of the other players who are backside. Not sure if they actually get anything out of this, but yeah, the stagger's still there. Like, this is 9th zone. There's still, you know, 10th, 11th, and 12th zones left in this. So the moving zones here are super brutal for a lot of these teams. So nice little stagger up to the front side too. Great height look. So you can see Cooper was staring up at height to try and see what was going up there. Could they possibly take it because they have materials? Didn't see. Now that the zone wraps all the way around, this is a really nice front low side. So they were able to drop to the left side, which is essentially dead side here, where there's no one at, and claim that entire side. And they saved a bunch of materials because they didn't have to build to their left to cover because the storm was there. Seems like a full piece onto Lachlan on low ground. A little bit of a whiff by Cooper. Didn't hit that many bangs at all. But now they've got a refresh. Now, though, they're stuck in an awkward spot. Clicks and Lacey already in front of them, pressuring. They're kind of get stuck in the middle of this, but luckily I think they have the, yeah, I was gonna say they have the shockwave, so they're able to get themselves out. No, good catch to get themselves back into storm. And I like how Cooper built back there for Zemi, so he kind of tarped himself in and ensured that Zemi was safe as well. But now they're running out of mats. Zemi has 0, Cooper has 5. They do have the shockwaves left, but pretty much no heals outside of the big pot, so they can't tank any storm, and there is no siphon in this game mode either, so they're gonna have to make a play. Seti on the back gets banged as well. He goes down, and I love how Cooper immediately grabs the siphon mats and just tarps himself in. He just creates space. He's not even worrying about picking up the loot. Like, that's Demi's job there. And Okada on low ground also getting picked up. Nice little claim by Cooper giving them a wall to escape from if need be. But now the double shockwave into Lacey and Clix's box, which picks up Lacey. Nice from Zemi to be able to get that out there as well. And then Cooper goes through again with another shockwave. Similarly, gets a bunch of the loot here, has what, 19 builds, enough to create some space. Again, goes to the edge of zone. So he's repeatedly tarping down on low ground, creating a bunch of that space on the edge to keep away from a bunch of the other teams, which is now, it's a top 3 scenario. Queasy in the feed picks up Podesai. So this is a 2v1v1, looking straight up to height. I think that is Queasy who's on high ground from my memory. Yep, almost got pumped there by the flyer by who jumped through. Zemi's got 3 elims. Cooper has 2 to his name. Nikov goes down in the storm. And now it's literally just a 2v1. So at this point, it's just all about pressure. So they're just going to spray and just instantly pick up the victory royale from there. And from the other games that I watched of Cooper and Zemi, this does look like this is their typical play style. Very low ground. Although they looked at height at one point, it wasn't a very high ground dominant kind of strategy for them total. It was really all about consistency. And honestly, that's probably what lost them the tournament. They only ended up getting 21 elims across all 6 games, whereas Pete and Ozzy, who won, got 41 elims. And it was a very elimination heavy format. So for them, this style was great. It won them the first game, but it probably unfortunately lost them the overall tournament. Game number 2 was won by Clix and Lacey, who landed at Steamy Stacks. Now here, similar to the previous game, they were contested off spawn by Veno and Reddish, but I'm not sure if they actually fought any games. I did see there were some games where Veno was landing kind of on this chest and spraying, but actually I was going to say the opposite happened in this first match, where Lacey landed on this hill and almost there was able to elim Veno out of the sky, which would, or just as soon as he landed, which would have been a nice little interaction off spawn. Single point, which as we mentioned with the previous game, elims are worth a lot. Now I actually really like the fact that he ended up landing up on this top chest here and then rotating behind the hill over here to make sure Veno doesn't shoot him back and get, again, similarly, a free elim onto him. Steamy Stacks was my drop spot for a long time. One of the beautiful things to know about it is that there's pretty much metal everywhere, and that's kind of similar to a lot of the drop spots in this season. As I mentioned previously with Cooper and Zemi in game 1, it's really difficult to actually get brick in this reload map. It's not metal that's the problem, which if you've watched any of my other videos in the normal battle royale mode, it's always metal that's the issue. But here, most of these teams just grab a lot of metal off spawn and then have to try and hunt down for some brick. So we'll see later where they end up actually getting it from. Speaking of, on the flip side, Lacey is at the back of the POI, and there appears to be some absolutely god bricks down there, which are really rare in this map at all, because basically wherever you go, as I already mentioned, there is no brick. So for Lacey being able to find a bunch of god bricks back here, Steamy Stacks seems like a bit of a go-to POI. Then it seems like Clix's way of getting around this is literally just farming the floors, which I think in most drop spots is probably the most efficient way to do it, unless you have a bunch of the god bricks around you. Again, you don't need storm surge damage, so you can just spend this early time harvesting, and I think that actually is what most of the most successful teams did. Very nice rotation by them, opting not to go into the actual stack and fly up itself, and instead rotate past to the left. And a purple pump RNG comes out. I actually didn't see a single gold pump clip throughout the entire time that I watched this event, so no winner I don't think had like a gold pump. I didn't see Peterbot hit any bangs with it. I don't think he had one at all. But so nice RNG off the rip. Another thing that they're doing is carrying crash pads, which is not something we saw Cooper and Zemi do. So we'll have to see how they use those later. Again, on a similar trend, they don't need to worry about taking storm damage like they did earlier, as a lot of this place has just slurp that you can heal with over and over. So again, here to the east of them, as they rotate it out, a couple slurp barrels, easily healed them up. Doesn't mean that they actually have to carry medkits at all. But obviously they do have whites in their inventory just in case they do still need to, but you'd have to milk massively to end up wasting them there. Now, they do hear a glider and people shooting next to them, and unfortunately, they're going to get an elim onto the one and only Allier, who definitely made this tournament. And if you watch the other video I've put out about this, you'll know how much Allier actually impacted this tournament, which was not something I was expecting coming into it. Now, I'm not actually sure if they knew about the supply drop forecast. As you can see, they spawned to the west here, but the position they ended up putting themselves in was just in Storm up next to Courage and Cold here. Maybe they just didn't see a path to rotate through, but it didn't seem like they were actually aware of the fact that this had forecast, as they could have put themselves into a better position there. Similarly, I'm not sure how much a lot of the teams knew, because you can see how many teams were up north, and when the zone pulls here, it was clearly shown before. I think Coyote's team almost definitely knew. The M8 boys definitely knew as well, and I imagine Aussie did. But there were still so many teams who were not positioned in an early spot inside of the zone, which they would have been able to had they been following Resub, and they would have known about these strategies already, because I've already shared them on Twitter and on my extra channel. Either way, they just walked in. The zone wasn't far, so it wasn't a big deal. 6th zone pulls over to their west. Pretty easy for them to rotate into. But this is probably, as I mentioned, where a lot of the teams are using their mobility, so I wouldn't be surprised if they end up using a crash. Yeah, I was going to say using a crash pad here, and as you can see, he's already going to throw it down. Sprint jump straight in. A lot of players were also using the Flowberries combined with these. So similar to the other teams, just using a bit of mobility early to get into those kind of partial zones. Another thing that I liked here is that a lot of the creators kind of knew their place, let's say. Lacey currently has 4 splashes and 2 slurps, whereas Clicks has a chug jug and then 3 bigs. And notice how Lacey drops and swaps. So essentially now Clicks has all of the best heals, and the reason you want to do this in this tournament was, again, it was a pro-am, so the creators just aren't as valuable as the pros. So giving the pros all the best loot makes a lot of sense, because they're probably going to be solo clutching in the end game. Now they are able to get their second elimination of the game. Unfortunately, it's onto Aussie Antics, who ends up going straight onto their wall, full boxed, and dies. Now I thought they were actually going to get materials refreshed from that, but Cammy and Jacob nabbed all of the loot. But to be honest, 78 builds and 122, they're already pretty stacked going into this end game, and they're going to start things off with a shockwave straight away. All right, so coming into moving zones, you can see Clicks is already scouting for height. I think it's the Brazilians there. It was Gon's team who just took it. But there's no point fighting for it backside, so they hit another crash pad to the front side. Create a bunch of space, but seems like Moxie's on the wall. Max damage. The purple pump coming in clutch there. That's materials refresh, so pretty much capped hard. So at this point, Clicks and Lacey could easily go for high ground if they wanted to. So he's going to start tarping front side. Yep. Okay. Classic. Basically get to front side, look back, and spray out height, especially if it's just a bit of a mess. Looking up, trying to see what's going on. Yep. Sees in wood. Sees one player on some scuffed little ramps, which means clearly they don't have many materials on height, so he can just build fight for it, especially since he got that refresh onto Moxie. Now Clicks is up. Lacey's also up. Easy already hold for them. 49 builds. Coming into 3 moving zones left, so they're going to need some refreshes. And players are still going to have a bunch of shockwaves coming into this point, so they're more than likely going to have to stay high enough in order not to be shockwaved out, which is really nice. They're already doing that. Unfortunately, this is where the milk from Lacey comes in. He's going to shockwave down, and Lacey edits through straight into Storm. Unfortunately, that is him dead. However, at this point, Clicks does pop off from my memory. Yep, drops straight onto Nikov. Gets the pickaxe, gets the elim out too. That means materials refreshed. Up to 31 builds. Pretty much all wood and siphon. Shockwaves up. Because Alex, yep, drops straight into the box. Beautiful max damage pump. And he actually had a lot of materials. So now Clicks can actually play this game out properly. 2 moving zones left into this as well. His mats are looking pretty decent. The last 2 minutes were literally just a zone pullback. So he was just spraying. Not much interesting going on. Bunch of whites onto players down below. There's only Fool Joe left alive, which I think was Cooper and Zemi, but one just went down. So now it's all solos. 1v1v1, Canada, Seti, and now Clicks. All right, Seti just elims Canada on the low ground, which means now he has Siphon mats, so he's much more. Clicks almost dies to fall here. There's the slurp popped. Seti goes straight up. Shockwave straight down. Good bang from Clicks. He's got no mats down on the low ground too. Finds a loot llama down there, which might actually be Lacey's mats, which would be funny, but only manages to get the wood from that, unfortunately. Shockwave's up. Shockwave's Seti out. Seti makes the great play to grapple back in. Yep. Shockwaves both of them out again, and then dies to Storm. So the Shockwaves coming in clutch to win the game, but also to almost milk it by pushing Lacey out into Storm. All right, game number 3 was won by Canada and Ron, who land at Stilt Town to the south here. And I know nothing about this drop spot, I'll be honest. All right, first thing I've learned. Awful brick. Very similar to most other POIs here. I think Ron has 70 brick and Canada has like also 70 in the area. So they're going to need to figure out how to get that later on. This is also the first instance of a game winner holding a mammoth pistol, as Canada has the gold one with a pump, which is tough to spray because obviously you want a lot of elims out the sky. And then Ronaldo has an SMG and a pump. So actually not the best loadout to get a bunch of elims out of the sky whatsoever, though hopefully Ronaldo picks up an AR instead. Boring update, but their brick comes from the north. There you go. Now they actually get 2 supply drops bang on their head, so they're gonna have a ton of capped mats from this. But also, we obviously already know that now they actually get 2 supply drops landing bang on their heads, which is very funny. So we basically know that they have guaranteed zone here, but also these have a ton of materials in them as well. So they're pretty much guaranteed to be entirely stacked from this. Canada also dropped that gold mammoth for a purple infantry rifle. Now, still Ron has the SMG, so obviously they're trying to split ammo because the drop spot doesn't actually have that much ammo there. But again, they get 0 elims of players out of the sky, which are extremely important in this tournament. So it's a little bit of a shame that the loadout they've chosen right now wasn't really fit to the meta. So they opt later on to both carry the same SMG. And now, as much as it didn't make sense earlier in the match because there's players spawning out of the sky, the reloads have ended now, so they can just do things like this where they double spray cold and get a super free elim. So good planning for later into the game. However, they do start this with 0 elims. I take that back. Ron dropped it for a hammer AR straight away. All right, they do frag out this end game a little bit. Aussie, oh, getting banged in the piece there. Unfortunately, not getting full boxed. Zone goes far. Canada knows he's weak underneath. Good protection to cover himself up. Aussie, unfortunately, gets packed in. Game number 3. Unlucky, but that was a good refresh. 133 and 73. So good mats going into the first moving zone. Similarly to Lacey's team, we saw shockwaves and also crash pads being carried here. So shockwave up, bit of a risky one. What I saw Peterbot do in that same scenario was place a bunch of ramps below him to catch himself up. But not what Canada ended up doing. Cones instead. Big beams onto the players next to him, now that they've got a lot of space to work with. Seems like Ron also frags out after the shockwave as well. Creates a bunch of space, which is really nice. Splashes to get the HP up. Does a good job scouting. 40, massive bang onto Jacob. Gets the refresh there. And managed to get another elim onto Nate Hill. So Ron's aim is looking pretty good. I don't know if he was actually able to get much of the loot from that. I don't think he got pretty much anything from it. Which I guess Canada was calling for him to come because he already has cap mat still. Nice. Zone pulls kind of back, so they end up going up and over, which is really nice. They don't have to spend as many materials. Drop straight down to the front low side as well, as it was a free. Nice elim onto Somerset at the backside. So again, more materials refreshed. But a lot of these players are the creators that they're killing, and they pretty much have no mats. So it's just Siphon they're getting off them. But Canada's now doing a good job doing airplane strat, where he's creating 2 boxes on low ground at once instead of the single one to give them more space to go for elims. Cooper on the backside also gets picked up. Probably just Siphon mats from him. Yep, not much at all. I remember this clip specifically from Ronaldo. Spraying into the bush. Nothing but aimbot. I think 150 Zos sneak up, but isn't able to get the elim as well. Canada doing a great job staying low. A lot of the teams that we've seen success from so far, or 2, we saw Lacey's team do the exact same thing, which was just playing low, sticking to edge. Sorry, not Lacey's team. Cooper's team. Staying low, just sticking to the edge of the zone. Ron takes over tarping, which is really nice, because of course Canada had to heal there. Now Canada's back on the job. And at this point, most of the players have died. So there's not that many people left up alive. And it's literally just a mess for height. They're the only team down low, and it just becomes about spraying Nikkei 30 out to win the entire game. So this game was interesting because there was no zone pullbacks whatsoever. So this game died out way earlier than all the others. This was still the 11th zone. It wasn't even into the final moving zone yet, and the game was already over. That meant that all that Ron and Canada really needed to do was just stay alive as a full duo as long as possible. And they did a great job by fragging out on low ground to do that. And then it was a simple case of just looking up to high ground, spraying out the teams who were still already fighting for it, and winning the game. So far, 3 for 3 duos all stayed alive till the very end, which was a trend we saw across all of the game winners, pretty much bar one, which is the next game. All right, game 4, the real game 4, not the cancelled game 4, was won by Aussie and Peterbot. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth on their strategy in this video because I'm doing an entire video, which should already be out on the channel, which I'll link back to at the end of this video here. But off the rip, Peterbot dies. So let's see, he's gliding down. Goes straight for the top chest. Now, if you've watched the main video of how they won, you already know this was a mistake, because this happened to Aussie in an earlier game where he already died off the rip. I think it was game number 2. So you'll notice by the elim feed here that there seems a little different from the vast majority of games. Now, they obviously won the tournament, and they pretty much did that by just W keying all of the teams surrounding them. In particular, Mongrel and Ali A. So when he kills Mongrel here, you'll see that Aussie ends up he's fighting Ali A, and he intentionally runs away and does not kill him. This is so that Mongrel will then spawn above him, and that they can continually farm one of the players over and over. They were pretty much prying on the fact that Ali A was not that good. The Mongrel spawns, they both go to spray him here, and there's a new amount of immunity, so you're actually alive in the sky and safe for way longer than previous. So here you can see Aussie says, you know what, I'm just shockwaving on Mongrel. We gotta watch this clip. As he's in the other building, Mongrel's over there. He's trying to loot up. He's got some minis. He's got some shield. He's got everything that he absolutely needs. Obviously, Mongrel absolutely shaking it right now, but the big Aussie's coming in. Absolutely no fear in the world. The most confident old man in the world. Hitting a shockwave. Sprays into the backside of the box. Full piece of the cone, and he's dead. Highlight moment of the tournament, I must say. You get the gist of where this is going. They're either killing Ali A, poor man, or they're killing Mongrel over and over again. So I think they get 6 elims out of this total, which, as I already mentioned, winning the game is worth 10. So a victory royale is worth 10, so 6 elims onto either Mongrel or Ali A in the early game is basically like getting a top 4, I think, which is way harder, as we've already seen by the rest of the games. What's actually interesting about this game is that Aussie drops down with 0 mats because Peterbot basically has nothing either, and he stays alive for so long, just slithering around behind all these different builds, keeping away from everyone. And it comes down to the top 4 where it is him still left alive. So he does a really, really good job of literally just not dying, which is obviously important. But at the same time, Peterbot's up on height. Now, the one thing he does here is really nice. Notice all of the way he protected himself. He covered himself with tons of floors and cones as the shockwave went off, but he only placed 2 walls here. Now, this is just so that the other player can just edit them straight out, and now he has full height. Cooper's going to chop down from up above. Unfortunately, he doesn't put the cross in the right place, but he's able to maintain height just by connecting himself on a few amount of walls, then covering his top a bunch. Now it's up to a top 4 scenario. Aussie is down, Courage is down. It's actually Cooper versus Cold versus Peterbot up on height. And the way he wins this is really, really nice. He ends up getting shot by the grapple of Cold there. I don't think he gets the elim, no, because he ends up going down to Storm. It's Cooper who gets that. Again, no siphon though. Peterbot has nothing, so he just has to drop down, but he gets shockwaved out. Hits just 2 ADS shots and manages to win the game. So again, didn't go into their strategy massively because I have the whole other video out on it already, but pretty much their strategy was way more revolved around farming players out the sky, specifically Ali A and Mongrel. Game 5, maybe the worst victory royale in Fortnite competitive history. Almost definitely in LAN history, I would say, and it was won by Faxity and Reason, the milkiest win probably of all time. As I already mentioned, they are landing at Dirty Docks, splitting the kind of southeast side of this. Apparently, they were landing closer to Peterbot, but in the practice games, they got bossed so much and W-keyed by Peterbot over and over again that they decided to move here. Now, the main selling point of this game is the chest that Reason opens at the start. The dev chest in reload. Now, I believe the chance for finding this is 0.2%, which is around 1 in 500 chance. So it's not actually as rare as I'd originally thought, but these numbers could also just be wrong. Either way, the weapons that he decided to go with are the heisted explosive assault rifle, which shoots explosive bullets, and then also the heisted breacher shotgun, which basically just absolutely rinses every single wall. I'll be honest, I'm currently scared seeing Faxity with the Dragon Breath shotgun. 1 bullet in it, like that's just a milk waiting to happen. Please pick up that pump. Okay, he dropped it for a grey pump. We're safe. Now, he opted to pick up the heisted Blink Mag SMG, and this gives you like a dash effect every time you reload. I'll be honest though, it's really not that good, and most of the other ARs are much better. This is really the strength of the explosive ARs. Like, when you're pressuring walls and just spraying stuff like this, it's pretty easy to get bleed through damage. You don't even need to shoot the bullet and hit them directly there. You just hit like that floor above and was easily able to get the elim onto Reddish. So the dev chest coming in strong. Now, this is something that a lot of the game winners haven't done so far, but a lot of the other teams were actually doing, and that is using flowberries. So you can see here that they pop a flowberry and then combine this with the shockwave. And this is a really good idea because the hill is pulling directly upwards. So by going a little higher here, they're actually able to elevate themselves onto a much better layer and essentially just take height from here. I lied, they didn't take height. You can see also now the pressure that you can do onto high ground, just chopping it out like that. With the amount of structure damage that both of these weapons do, it's going to be so hard for anyone to go up. So it's a really good idea just to chop them out from height, even if they have no intention of going up, because that just griefs the team's materials who are already going for it. and easy to chop down players like Ronaldo too. So being on low ground with this is incredibly good. They actually end up taking height later in this game, and the gun doesn't end up being anywhere near as powerful as it is on low. This is really nice. After getting that refresh, they spend a bunch of time just playing the chug splashes in the back zone whilst all the other players are fighting, because all they need to do then is just chuck a shockwave to get back inside of the zone and be completely safe. See Booga now up on height in wood only. Should be a free chop, but no, they end up getting sprayed back. Now have to spend the time healing. Zone pulls completely back, and I don't think they have much of a tarp here. They end up shockwaving up onto height. Booga shockwaves them out on into storm as well. That's a free height claim for both Reason and Faxity now. And now we're going to see possibly the worst win of all time. They still just start to run low on mats now because of that. Booga manages to get an elim onto Typical Gamer down below. He needs to drop, but he has minimal materials. So he shockwaves, and boom! Faxity goes straight out into storm. He ends up chucking a shockwave. Front side of zone. Almost dies to the storm now. Down to 20. So 2 ticks to storm later and he will die. But because of the materials they got back, Reason is able to go all the way back up onto high ground. Gives him a bunch of mats. And now it's a 2v1v2. Pressure starts to come down onto Daya down below. I think Cooper drops down and ends up wiping out Seti there. Yep, Seti goes down. Reason gets the knock. And Faxity makes an unreal play. 0 builds. Jumps off. Because he took so much storm, he dies to full damage. Reason now drops. Because he has this shotgun that's impossible to hit, he misses a bullet and then hits a max to end up winning the game in almost the milkiest game possible. In this scenario, literally all Daya needed to do was hit one big bang of a pump here. And unfortunately, she didn't. She hit a 67 there. Had that been a max, easily could have won the game and ended up losing it for Reason and Faxity because they ended up taking so much storm damage and fall damage. Definitely goes down as one of the worst wins in competitive Fortnite history of all time. Game number 6, the final game, was won by Podesai and Nikov, and their elimination spread looks a lot more similar to Peterboss, so let's see how they do it. Firstly, and most importantly, they're landing at Boomin Base up to the northeast. What's interesting about this drop spot is it has significantly less slurp barrels and heals than almost any other drop on the map. It only has 14 barrels and no slurp trucks, which is insane in comparison to Slurpee, for example, which has like 220, I think. Now, when I say their strategy was similar to Aussie and Peterbots, I mean it, because Ali and Mongol switch drop spots, and they just farmed them for a couple kills in the mid-game. And you can see Podesai end up using a crash pad because he saw Lachlan glide into Storm. Now, there's pretty much no one in the Storm, as you can see at this area. So as soon as he heard him respawn and fly back, there's almost no risk of jumping in. And again, one single elim point is absolutely worth jumping back into the Storm to pick up a free elim on a guy who has no shield and just an AR. Then you can see the awareness. He's always looking around. He sees the rift come out and that Lachlan spawns on that far side. And again, they're committing a bunch of their mobility early just to chase down Lachlan to get a bunch of elims. They've actually gone all the way to Dirty Docks from Boomin Base all the way around just to chase him here, which is pretty much the entire way around the map in Storm. But again, the Storm's only at 1 damage per tick at this point, so it's not that bad. Able to get the elim off onto him. No extra loot that they can get, unfortunately, but that's now 3 points, which, as I mentioned, is the same as a top 7 in this format, which is way more difficult. You then spend around like 5 minutes almost in Storm, just in Dirty Docks, grabbing a bunch of extra loot, getting their mats refarmed, finding a bunch more materials. And again, they can do this because it's only a 1 tick, so they can stay in here for a long time. They also pull a relatively favorable zone, being in Dirty Docks when it pulls up to the northeast. This entire time, they've just had this slurp truck outside of the POI that they intentionally didn't break, which means when they actually want to rotate into the safe circle, they just break that, run out, and they're pretty much at max HP. In what looks like entirely deja vu from Cooper and Zemi's gameplays, they end up harvesting out this building to make sure they have as many mats as possible. And then when the zone pulls up to the northeast, or the northwest, sorry, they just sprint and then swim away from everyone else. Now, if you notice again, because it's a north pool, everyone else pretty much is to the south, so this swim gets them in relatively for free. They actually swam all the way across the water without taking a single tick of damage. They end up positioning themselves in the center of the zone, which if the zone pulls to the west, they have a free rotate north. If it pulls north, which I don't know if it can, there's no one there. If it pulls to the east, they're away from everyone else. And if it pulls to the south, that is the worst rotate they can get, but they're still giving themselves the best opportunity to rotate regardless. Then the second the zone pops, they instantly grab a crash pad and go round the side away from everyone else that I already mentioned is not there, and instantly get into a good position on the Storm. Podesai then does a good job of just scouting above him and seeing that Clicks and Lacey are getting focused, so he full pieces him down on low, does a good job of throwing the body back, and then creates a bunch of space. So from this elim, they've then got a basically completely capped materials, both of them, 130 on Nikov and then 150 on Porosai. So that sets them up really nicely for the endgame. They make a really nice play in this endgame as they see a large tarp that's literally just in wood. So they can just double pickaxe in, cone, box Faxity, and pick up a nice refresh. Sure, they won't have that many materials from this, but another elim is really valuable in this format. Now, their height take is actually hilarious in this game, and I didn't see this in the broadcast, but Porosai picked up a rocket launcher in in-game somehow, which had one rocket. So he shockwaves up on height, rockets Queasy, and then they just have height from there. All right, Porosai shockwaves down. He gave Nikov a bunch of his mats before that. He knows he needs to get fraggy. They don't have enough mats to tarp their way all the way into the end game. They are the only duo left alive. So you don't want to milk, so Porosai doesn't want to drop down, do anything too stupid, too aggressive, because he could end up risking losing the entire game from here. Hero, gone, sorry, starts to go up. He shockwaves out, but Nikov's done a good job of staying high enough. They won't actually chop him out from there. Good shot onto Gone as well. He tries to shockwave out the box again. Porosai goes straight back into the storm. Won't be able to hit the pump. Nope, misses the pump onto Gone because he runs around the corner. 0 builds total to his name. Nice right-hand peek. Nikov picks up the elim from the sky. And now Cooper down below ends up shockwaving up. He's got a bunch of space. But again, Nikov's high enough that he's not getting chopped. Nice beams onto Cooper. Almost wipes him out. Now misses the pump, unfortunately. Good sprint to go around the corner. Now it's just a 1v2. Should be easy. Cooper gets picked up for that final elim. Honestly, the most interesting part of this game to me was just the random rocket launcher find in the moving zones in endgame. Without that, they could have definitely won this match, but this actually put them up into 3rd place total, which is a big jump in the prize pool, and obviously is big flex being 3rd overall. Earlier on, I already mentioned how I made another video on the Pro-Am, which is how Aussie Antics became Australia's best Fortnite player. If you want to watch that, you can click on this video right here.